Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this incredible webinar on really thinking of and learning more about neurodiversity as the superpower that it is and what that looks like on our teams, especially in workplaces. I know that I am so excited about today's presentation. I plan on learning a lot myself. This is part of our webinar series, which we've called Navigating the Uncharted. I'm Ashley Virtue. I'm with the National Conflict Resolution Center. And if you aren't familiar with our work, the way I like to say it is if there's any challenging conversation to be had out there, we have a training on that. We are here to equip people, to equip workplaces, workplace leaders, frontline staff, mid-level managers, everyone in workplaces, in communities, in schools, in classrooms, with the skills to communicate effectively, especially around challenging topics and challenging issues. And I think that one topic that, we don't talk a lot about as workplace leaders, and we don't get very specific training on it often, is this idea of neurodiversity in our workplace and how we can work and support our teams because there's so much to be learned here and to tap into, I think, that could be beneficial. So, being an expert in communication skills and conflict resolution, I know that as I go out around the country doing different workshops on, maybe giving constructive feedback or how to be an effective upstander, I hear things around this topic come up, and I recognize that it's not something we talk about all the time. So we're really proud to bring it here today, and a lot of folks have signed up for this. So I know there's a lot of interest from the community to hear about it. Some of you have also already asked and sent in some questions, and so we thank you so much for that. We're going to encourage you today. What we'll do is we'll go through a little bit of an interview, myself and Dr. Rivera, who I'll be introducing shortly, and then we will welcome you to put some questions in the chat. We know in a half an hour presentation on a huge topic, we are not going to be able to probably get to all of them. But we are going to provide you today with some really practical and useful tools that you can take with you. And then here's the great news. If there are any questions we don't get to today, we'll be doing a follow-up email where we answer your questions. We include a copy of the recording that you can use later. So keep that in mind, but feel free to put those in there. And about halfway through, we'll be able to look at some of those questions. So without further ado, and because I know we have so much to talk to you about, I'm delighted to introduce you to Dr. Jade Rivera, who's with us today. And I want to just tell you a little bit about her because she is so very impressive. She's the lab director of the Strength-Based Assessment Lab, and she's faculty at Elmbridge University, which focuses on cognitive diversity in education. Dr. Rivera researches strength-based assessment and strength-based talent-focused approaches for neurodivergent individuals. As a published author, she's written numerous influential articles and blog posts and is a sought-after speaker at national conferences. She also leads impactful workshops for educators and parents and workplaces, providing innovative strategies for supporting neurodivergent individuals. Dr. Rivera, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction.
Well, I know that we have a lot to get to, so I would love to just kind of jump into the first question, which, I think as we get started, we actually maybe need to define neurodiversity. And I wonder if you could help us. What do we mean by neurodiversity and neurodivergence?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So, through neurodiversity and neurodivergence, we're really referring to a natural variation in brain designs. And that variation in brain designs can shape attention, learning, communication, sensory processing, so much more. And examples of neurodivergence include ADHD, dyslexia, and autism. And again, there's so much more more to that, and including, co-occurring diagnoses. And there are strengths and there are challenges in all kinds of minds, right? And so planning at the systems level for both how for both is how leaders can really maximize both mission effectiveness and belonging. So the same team, your same team definitely holds multiple brain designs or multiple neurodivergences of varying and intensities. And that variation produces different perspectives and problem-solving approaches and signals for risk. And what I want people to know is that leaders really set the norm for what gets respected, what gets accommodated, and what gets rewarded.
I love that you say that. We talk about that so much in our communication trainings, which is leaders set the norm for what gets respected. That's a powerful line. And I think sometimes there's just unknowns in this space, and the more we can make it a known and educate, I think it helps so that that respect can show up in the proper ways.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, I love that you have some really concrete things for us to talk about here. You've identified 5 environments that need to be considered when supporting and working with neurodivergent individuals. And I think this will be very helpful for a lot of us who want to support our differently wired thinkers, but maybe don't know how. So, will you walk us through these 5 environments?
Yes, absolutely. And I should say that this is not my work alone. This is work that was initiated by Dr. Susan Baum and Dr. Robin Shader in their careers, and it is central to our pedagogical network at the graduate school where I'm faculty and director. So lots of thinking and effort behind this conceptual framework that I have definitely contributed to, but absolutely did not initiate. So I just want to say that real quick. So we've found that it's incredibly important, whether we're talking about the workplace, the classroom, the home, extracurriculars, community centers, wherever, right? That we think about accessibility as belonging from an environmental perspective, right? From an accessibility perspective. And we found that you can break the environment down into 5 pieces. So the physical, the intellectual and academic, in our case here for this conversation, really talking about how work is learned, understood, and executed. The social, the emotional, so we're talking about psychological safety there, and then the creative. And you might be thinking to yourself, oh, there's so much overlap between these different environments. And you're so right. They're absolutely interdependent. And we found that when you take each one out, when you tease them all out and look at them from a 360 perspective, you uncover solutions for belonging that you might not have noticed otherwise. And so we really believe in this framework for belonging and for accessibility, and I'm excited to tell you more about that. And so I'd like to start with the physical environment, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Okay, so here we go. The physical environments, quiet zones and collaboration zones.
Yeah, yeah. So in this environment, we really want to design for sensory variability and access without singling people out. Okay, so we're talking about choice of setting as the norm. And I give you some ideas about things to implement in your workplace there on the slide. But for leaders, I want to give you some language to use when you're offering this, various settings as the norm. It really is about using what you need to do your best work with no explanations required. And then if you want to move on, yeah, we'll just kind
Kind of
of,
go through. You got it.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so next we have the intellectual academic environment.
Yeah, so the intellectual and academic environment really just providing, clarity. I call this dual channel clarity. So information is never delivered in only one format. There has to be an opportunity to watch and to listen and or read. And so it's important that people remember that clarity is not micromanagement, right? We can feel like we're doing a lot when we're trying to make the implicit explicit at work, but that's how you create inclusion and that's how you create belonging. And so I give you some ideas about how to do this on the slide. And if you want to move on to the social environment, I know we're moving through these quick, and I have so much to say about all of them, but we have a very limited amount of time here, and we do want to answer some questions. So
Absolutely. And this, I'll just say, looking at this, I love what you have here too, because again, coming from our perspective of helping people communicate effectively in challenging conversations, you see some themes show up in the same way, like clarity. Setting clear expectations is good for everyone. And
That's
it
right.
seems here like it's also a matter of how that's done, but you can have that as your norm as a leader. And then maybe just
Yep.
how it's done is really important. So I
You're
appreciate that.
You're absolutely right. And I do want to say that these accommodations, right? These benefit everyone,
Mm,
not just those who are neurodivergent. And so just because a person is more able to fit in to a neuronormative environment, which that's a whole other presentation, everyone benefits from these and on a singular level and from a team-based perspective.
hmm. Okay, so next you have social environment. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I just lost my AirPod here, so let me
Oh.
just take care of this. So funny. All right. So social environment. So really, making participation predictable and flexible, right? So
Mm,
using structured participation options and making sure everyone knows those up front. So agendas with roles, everyone knows what they're here to do, right? And how to do it. Explicit turn-taking norms. And communicating those things ahead of time. And then leaders making it clear to their team that you evaluate contribution by performance impact, not performance style.
mm.
So, how do you actually move the needle at work, and how are you actually contributing in a concrete way to the success of the mission, right? And not sort of like the vibes that you bring, and making that, having that, explicit in your systems and how you interact socially is one way that you can contribute to so much belonging for neurodivergent individuals.
And I would imagine that you're not always going to know right off the bat what this looks like. It's something you probably have to be conscientious of as a workplace leader, get to know your team so
That's
that you
right.
can be responsive and even ask questions maybe
That's
about,
right.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And it's so much too, like just being super intentional about welcoming, right? So we tend to eat lunch here and we sit at this table and here's this chair for you rather than just thinking it's obvious, right? That's one
mm.
little thing that you can do to enrich the social environment at your workplace. And when I say it, you're sort of like, well, I mean, of course. And also it happens so rarely.
I mean, especially on teams that maybe are more external facing, there's a pressure to, you said, like have good vibes.
Yes.
And, again, to relate it to our work, we talk a lot about communication style differences and how in conflict, if you're a very direct communicator in conflict, you want to get it taken care of. And you're trying to talk with someone who is more indirect and needs more time to process. And you kind of make assumptions about that person. And well, oh, they're just being passive aggressive and they're not, when actuality, it's they will come to you better if they have that time to process. And you're seeing something similar here, which is that investment of getting to know your employees, how to support them in that social environment, and not just assuming like, oh, if you're social, you're a better teammate. They're,
Yes.
what does
Yep.
social really mean, and how do you bring
Yes.
that out in
What
someone?
are you prioritizing and why, and getting clear on that as a leader? Yeah. And
Mhm.
whether or not that's best.
Okay, let's move on to the emotional environment. I'm really interested in this one.
Yeah. So, I like to say that psychological safety is designed, not declared, right? So you can
Mm.
say that this is a safe space, right? And also because saying that doesn't necessarily make it true. And so what I've tried to offer here are some, tips or some ideas about how to actually design a psychologically safe environment. And I think it's important to remember that safety is created by what happens after friction. Breaks in connection are going to take place. That's part of living, that's part of, life and work. And that's why your organization exists, right? Is to learn how to navigate that with grace. And so, really from a leadership perspective, narrating and being extremely explicit about, doing better, being better, and repairing when connection is lost. And really understanding the difference between intent and impact, right? And I think these are just a couple of ways that you can create that psychological safety in the workplace.
I just absolutely love that it's created, not just stated, because
Yes.
with all it really takes a lot of effort, and that's a very helpful tip. Normalize being able to
Yeah,
say, I just need a minute or I need some
yeah,
clarification.
yeah,
Give again, like you mentioned at the beginning, you are modeling everything you do as a workplace leader.
that's right.
Okay, and then I think the last of your five environments, and then we'll go a little bit more into questions and some tips, is the creative environment.
I feel like this is such a high leverage environment for neurodivergent individuals in the workplace. Like this is, to me, this is where fun lives. I'm sorry, maybe I'm a little biased, but we're talking about people that are having an experience outside of the norm, right? And because they're having an experience outside of the norm, they're going to have thoughts, feelings, noticing things, wondering about things, questions that are outside of the norm. And we know that all of that pushes innovation and creativity, right? And so really leveraging the creative environment to create belonging for your neurodivergent employees is just, it's fun and it's
Mm.
effective. And so, but, creativity needs permission, it needs time, and it needs a path, right? So creating low stakes experimentation lanes, spaces, right, is something that you want to implement as a leader. So encouraging drafts, just iteration, right? With offering feedback along the way, and then recognizing, novel approaches and saying, like, oh, that's a really interesting way of going about that. I would not have occurred to me. I wonder how we might, right, make this client ready or public ready. And then working together on the delivery of that and allowing your creative people to be creative, I think is just, again, you can see I kind of get excited when we talk about the creative environment because it is very fun, and I think it's one way that we can signal belonging for our neurodivergent you know friends,
Well,
workplace.
and I love the framing because creativity is really all about thinking outside the box. I mean, that's the whole purpose of it is to, break through norms. And that's why we have creativity. What can we do different? And so embracing that, I can see why it excites you so much because that's really a place to shine.
Right. I mean, and we are living in an increasingly unpredictable future, right? That's going to need creative solutions to solve the problems that we're facing. And so making space for creativity is just so important.
I really appreciate you going through these five environments with us because already for me, it's giving me an ability to break those down and think about them independently instead of
Yes.
just creating a welcoming, inclusive environment
Right.
and trying to hit some of those, really
Yeah.
spending
It's
it
like, what does that even mean? Right.
right.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
feels like as a workplace leader, the homework I need to do is look at these independently, these five environments, and really think about what that looks like. And I just appreciate the structure in that. And for those of you watching or thinking, I want to send this to people, a reminder that we will send out a link to the recording and these resources to you. So, don't fear. I know that was a lot, but you'll be able to keep thinking about that because that's how I'm feeling right now is I want to spend some time on this as homework and myself just do some research, planning, strategic thinking.
Yeah.
I know you already are thinking about this, and so how do you recommend that one gets started on planning?
Yeah, absolutely. I think your idea about reflection, auditing, surveying, in a safe way that doesn't call anyone out is, a really good idea. And I think you're tempted to watch something like this and be like, we're changing everything tomorrow, but we know that type of change isn't sustainable. And so we want to give you a plan here, a plan of action. So really just starting with one environment and tweaking one thing, you'll be surprised at how much that increases accessibility and belonging in whatever environment you exist within. Pick something low lift. What could you implement right away? And really talking to people about why you're doing this. Why are you making this shift? And then inviting that feedback and iterating from there, because nobody gets this right on the first try, right? It's that openness, it's that flexibility, right, that creates the foundation upon which this environmental design can take place. And so I think committing to a practice of it, understanding that this work is never done, times are changing, like life changes, staff changes happen, et cetera, right? And so this is something that's going to be tweaked over time. And so what I like to say to people is that this is really a mindset. This is really about adopting a flexible, iterative mindset in which you see the environment as malleable and as able to be affected and shifted and changed to serve the needs of the people who exist and work within it. And so even if you just start to internalize this as like an idea and as a conceptual framework and a lens through which to see, the outside world, you're doing great.
And you keep using this word modeling, and it makes me think about the concept of transparent leadership too,
Yes.
because there has to be, I think, a little bit of vulnerability in this and a little bit of transparency to say, uh, talk with me. I may make mistakes or I may not focus on the right thing first or the thing we as a team want to. So let's talk.
Yes.
I don't know that that's always natural to some
Mhm.
of us as leaders, but one of our webinars was actually on transparent leadership. And
Mhm.
we talked about how natural or not, it is the bedrock for
Yes.
a cohesive high performance team,
Yeah.
to be able to look at one of these things. And this is really helpful. Start with one environment and just
Yeah.
go from there. That's so
Yeah.
practical.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a big deal either, right? That transparent leadership, when
Yeah.
you make a mistake and are vulnerable, you're like, oh, wow, I really messed that up. How can we fix it? All right, moving on.
Thanks for
It
telling
doesn't,
me. Let's do,
yeah.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. We have fantastic questions coming in.
Oh, good.
So, what I'm doing, and I also have a list of some questions that came in before, is I'm going to kind of group some of them thematically together that I'm seeing. And one of them is about communicating to whether it's a manager. I think the manager might be a separate thing, but communicating to a manager or employees when someone does get diagnosed, maybe as a current employee, especially if the manager and other team members, they haven't had any kind of training like this. And so how do you communicate with them about the
Mhm.
next steps and what to do here?
Yes, absolutely. And so, this is a sort of your mileage may vary situation, right? So you have
Hmm.
to ask yourself, do these people have the capacity, right, to take in this vulnerability from me, right? Have you been able to trust them in the past with, information that made you feel a little bit vulnerable? And how did they do with that, right? So you have to assess for that risk yourself, right? And if the answer is yes, that you believe they can handle it, then proceed. And if not, or because nobody wants to be judged against a stereotype, right? Or
Hmm.
against a preconceived notion about what you can or can't do. You want to make that decision for yourself, right? Because when you've
Yeah.
met one neurodivergent person, you've met one, right? And so everybody brings, despite diagnoses, everybody still brings their unique constellation of strengths and challenges to the table. And so, what can you ask for? What can you actually, if you tell the people, well, I've learned that I'm autistic, and I think you should know, and it's and X, Y, and Z, right? People aren't necessarily going to know what to do with that. If you're like, I really need a quiet space in the break room, a designated quiet space in the break room so that I can, recharge before this big meeting that we have every Wednesday, right? that's something actionable and concrete that the people who are leading your workspace can do, pretty much right away for you, right? And you don't necessarily need to divulge, what you're working with in terms of your neurocomplexity. And so I think assessing for safety and then making some concrete requests about what you need to be able to access the workplace are really the next steps.
Hmm. And I guess that ties into another question I'm kind of seeing, which is the almost the flip side of that. What if you feel that you have an employee that needs special support, but they haven't come to you? I think that's a
Mhm.
hard thing because you don't want to overstep.
Mhm.
And so, are there ways to bring this up that you've seen to be effective, where you want to support these environments, but you don't want to overstep?
Yeah, I think something we talk about at the graduate school a lot is something called invisible accommodations. So there are accommodations or, design levers that are put in place environmentally as a matter of course, as a matter of best practice. So everything that I've outlined here, right, as we mentioned, is great for everyone. And
Hmm.
so, making sure that those spaces are there and then calling attention to everyone that, hey, we've made this sort of like designated quiet space in the break room for everyone, you know, um, that's great, and what you'll find is that perhaps that person who you suspect to have some diversity, some neurodiversity or neurodivergence going on uses it, but then you'll find that people who you didn't suspect use it as well and enjoy it and need it in order to stay, you know, engaged through the day.
I think we have time for this one more question, but I will remind everyone that we will be doing a follow-up email that not only has a link to this recording, but that has the answer to some of the questions we didn't get to. But I think this one is relevant, and I've heard it a couple of times, which is how do you adapt this for a remote workplace? Like,
Yeah.
obviously, physical environment is about the physical and off. How do you adapt for a remote workplace?
I mean, the I think
You're
like
like, I can't answer
a
this in 60
collective
seconds.
yay from the neurodivergent community when remote work became a thing, right? I mean, so you get to prioritize comfort when you're in your own space and also making sure you have those captions turned on, providing,
Mhm.
digital summaries of what took place in the meeting through email so that refreshing people's memory and accountability and follow up and, explicitness is there. Allowing for camera off, I think is great and ideal. So those are just a couple of things that you can put in place and ensuring, reaching out. I think with the remote work situation, I mentioned over communicating before, that goes double for the remotes. We're so atomized in these remote work environments that you have to really dedicate yourself to comprehension and making sure that people are looped in and know what's going on in a multimodal format, at all times. And that seems like a lot at first, but then you get used to it, I promise.
Yeah.
And it just becomes a matter of habit.
And I would argue that all of this that you're talking about I would recommend that from a communication and a leadership perspective that we teach, that these are things that you are doing as a workplace leader anyway, that you are investing that one-on-one time with your
Right.
employees because, frequently I hear from leaders and managers like, well, what if I don't know what the underlying values and needs of my employees are, which in conflict resolution is always your starting point for like trying to
Yeah.
resolve things.
Yeah.
And, I argue that you should try to know that
Try to
because,
find out.
yeah, it
Yeah.
will make your life easier. It will make the conflicts you have to resolve easier and your conversations better. And so it's that investment that at first feels like it takes more time and it saves you time in the long run because you're able to support in these very natural ways instead of guessing. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
so I do want to just kind of share with everyone that I'm so pleased that you joined us today, and I look forward to how we'll continue this conversation with our follow-up email. We also have a few resources for you here that I just wanted to kind of share as you go. The first is that the National Conflict Resolution Center, we have curated free resources for workplace leaders. And so, as I mentioned, if you are looking for anything that has to do with navigating challenging conversations at work, we have this library available online. And if you scan this QR code, it takes you to a page where I think you put in your name or something, but then you have access forever to this library. And every single week, we're updating it with videos, with webinars, with, articles, published, papers on this stuff. So we all know that the ground is constantly shifting beneath us and that we are navigating all the time. So if you're looking for resources in real time, it's there for you. The other thing I will share is that we also offer a certificate for workplace leaders. It's called the Culture, Communication, and Conflict Certificate. And if you're looking for more communication skills and strategies for how to handle the shifting landscape and challenging conversations, it is an amazing, amazing program. We have one for seasoned leaders and we have one for emerging leaders. So if you're already on our website from the free resources, you can find it pretty easily under training services, but I wanted to share that. And then finally, I just wanted to share Dr. Rivera's contact information, as well as share that for those of you who asked about this in the context of education. I mean, Dr. Rivera, that's where all of this started for you, right? It was in the
That's
context
right.
of working with educators in this space
Yes.
and creating these environments for children. And you've even written books on this, right?
I have, yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah. So if you want to learn more about this, take a deeper dive, understand more about cognitive diversity, neurodivergence, neurodiversity, I welcome you to reach out to me. We do have a whole graduate program about it where we offer certificate, master's, and doctoral degrees related to strength-based practices, which is everything that we were just talking about tonight, or today rather, neuroaffirming practices and neurodivergence and neurodiversity. So please reach out to me. I see I actually have a student in the chat here, Maria Selke, a wonderful student of mine who is a current doctoral student. And so I would love to tell you more about it, and I would love to work with your organization to bring these ideas to you to where you work.
Amazing. Well, Dr. Rivera, thank you so much. I have gotten so much out of this. I see all of the ways that our two areas of expertise overlap because at the end of the day, it's all about meeting people and being able to connect with them. And so thank you for these very, very valuable tips. Thank you everyone for tuning in and being part of this important conversation. We will follow up with a link to the recording. And after we have some time to process the questions, we'll also follow up with an email that has the answer to those we didn't get to. All right, everyone, stay safe out there and thank you.